Grandpa, can you tell us a story?
Grandpa smiled. Of course. Tonight, I'll tell you about a brave young shepherd named David.
Was he a prince, Grandpa?
He was even braver than a prince. He faced a giant.
A giant? Was he scared?
He was, but David knew something important. He knew that even though he was small, God was with him. David lived in a time of giants. One giant named Goliath was very mean. He was a Philistine warrior who terrorized the Israelites. David, a young shepherd boy, was known for his bravery and faith. He spent his days tending to his father's sheep and playing his harp. But little did he know, his life was about to change forever. Goliath was a fearsome sight to behold. He was taller than a house and carried a spear as big as a tree trunk. His armor gleamed in the sunlight, and his voice thundered across the valley. Ben shivered at the thought of such a giant. Sarah held onto her teddy bear tightly, her eyes wide with fear. She couldn't imagine anyone being brave enough to face such a monster. Goliath stood on a hilltop, shouting at the Israelite army. His voice echoed through the valley, sending chills down the spines of the soldiers below. He challenged them to a fight, his eyes blazing with arrogance. "Send your strongest soldier to fight me," he boomed, his voice filled with confidence. "Send your strongest soldier to fight me," he boomed again, his voice echoing through the valley. "If he wins, we will be your slaves. If he wins, we will be your slaves. But if I win, you will be ours." His words hung in the air, a challenge that no one dared to accept. Goliath stood with a triumphant stance, confident that no one would dare to face him. He loomed over the valley, a menacing figure that seemed invincible.
That's not fair. Goliath was so big. It wasn't a fair fight. How could anyone stand a chance against such a giant?
You're right, Sarah. It wasn't. The Israelite soldiers were all too afraid to fight him. They trembled in fear, their hearts filled with dread. The Israelite soldiers were all too afraid to fight him. They avoided eye contact, backing away in fear. Some even hid behind their shields, hoping to avoid Goliath's gaze. The situation seemed hopeless, and the Israelites were on the brink of despair. But little did they know, a tiny hero was about to step forward and change everything. David, the young shepherd boy, stepped forward. He picked up 5 smooth stones from a stream and placed them in his pouch. With his sling in hand, he approached the battlefield, his heart filled with faith and determination. As David faced Goliath, he stood bravely, his eyes locked on the giant. He knew that with faith and courage, even the mightiest giant could be defeated. The stage was set for an epic battle, one that would be remembered for generations to come. One day, David's father sent him to take food to his brothers, who were soldiers in the Israelite army. When David arrived at the camp, he heard Goliath's challenge. He was shocked that no one would fight the giant.
I would fight him.
Sarah giggled.
You're too little, Ben.
David was small too, but he wasn't afraid. He told the king, "I will fight Goliath. God saved me from lions and bears when I was watching my sheep. God will save me from this giant." Section 4. The battle begins. King Saul was amazed by David's courage, Grandpa said. He offered David his own armor, but it was too big and heavy. The armor, made of bronze and iron, was designed for a seasoned warrior, not a young shepherd boy. David struggled to move in it, feeling the weight of the metal pressing down on him. He knew that fighting in this armor would only slow him down and make him vulnerable. David decided to fight in his own way. He took off the armor and stood there, feeling the cool breeze on his skin. He felt lighter, more agile, and ready to face whatever came his way. David believed in his own skills and the tools he had always used to protect his flock.
What did he use? Ben asked, eyes wide. The curiosity in his voice was palpable, as if he couldn't fathom how David could face such a formidable opponent without the protection of armor.
He took his shepherd's staff and a sling, Grandpa replied. The staff was a simple wooden stick, but it had been his constant companion in the fields. The sling, a leather strap, was something he had used countless times to protect his sheep from predators. And 5 smooth stones from a stream, Grandpa explained. Each stone was carefully chosen for its smoothness and weight, perfect for slinging. David knew that these stones, combined with his skill, could be deadly. Then he went to face the giant. With each step he felt a surge of confidence, knowing that he was not alone in this battle. Goliath laughed when he saw David, Grandpa continued. He thought it was silly that a shepherd boy dared to challenge him. "Am I a dog," Goliath roared, "that you come at me with sticks?" His voice boomed across the valley, filled with disdain and mockery. But David stood his ground, unshaken by the giant's taunts. He knew that true strength came not from size or armor, but from faith and courage. As Goliath continued to laugh, David prepared himself, ready to show the world that even the smallest among us can achieve great things. Section 5. A well-aimed stone. David stood firm, Grandpa said. He knew God was with him. "You come against me with sword and spear," David called back, "but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty." The fire crackled and the wind howled outside, but Sarah and Ben were glued to their grandpa's words. David put a stone in his sling and swung it with all his might, Grandpa said. The stone shot through the air with incredible speed and force.
"Did it hit him?" Ben whispered, holding his breath.
Section 6. Victory for the brave. "Yes, Ben," Grandpa smiled. The stone hit Goliath right in the forehead. The giant stumbled and fell with a tremendous crash. He was defeated. Sarah and Ben cheered. David had done what no one else could do. He defeated the giant with courage, faith, and a well-aimed stone. The Philistines were terrified and ran away. David and the Israelite army were victorious. David had saved the day. Section 7. What we can learn from David. Grandpa smiled at the children's excited faces. The room was filled with warmth, not just from the crackling fireplace, but from the love and joy that radiated from the family gathered around. The children, with their wide eyes and eager expressions, were always ready for another one of Grandpa's stories. David's story teaches us that even when we face giants in our own lives, like fear or challenges, we can be brave like David. David, a young shepherd boy, faced the giant Goliath with nothing but a sling and a few stones, yet his faith and courage were his true weapons. He didn't let the size of the giant intimidate him. Instead, he trusted in his abilities and in God's support.
We can ask God for help, Sarah said thoughtfully. She remembered the times when she felt scared or unsure, and how praying always made her feel stronger. Just like David did, she added, her eyes reflecting the flickering flames of the fireplace.
That's right, Grandpa said, and we can remember that with faith and courage, even the smallest person can do amazing things. He looked at each of his grandchildren, knowing that they all had their own battles to face. You see, he continued, David wasn't the strongest or the biggest, but his heart was full of faith, and that's what made him a hero.
Ben snuggled closer to Grandpa. "Can you tell us another story, Grandpa? Please?" he asked. His voice was soft but filled with anticipation. He loved these moments, wrapped in Grandpa's arms, listening to tales of bravery and wisdom.
Sarah nodded eagerly. She loved hearing Grandpa's stories too, especially the ones that made her feel like she could do anything. Her smile was bright and her excitement was contagious. Grandpa chuckled. "All right," he said, "but first, let's have some warm milk and cookies." He knew that these simple pleasures were the perfect way to end the evening. The children cheered, their faces lighting up even more. As they gathered around the table, Grandpa thought about the importance of these moments. It wasn't just about the stories, but about the lessons they carried and the love that bound them together. With each story, he hoped to instill a sense of courage, faith, and the belief that they could overcome any giant they faced in life.